Poland. What comes to your mind when you hear the word? Stunning architecture, great food, rich and amazing history, or the various partitions the country was subjected to in the last 250 years? Well, today we'll discuss that. I would like to welcome you all to another video, and today's topic will be, what if Poland formed the Intermarium? Now, we all know the history, but for those of you who are new or just don't know, Poland had a great Middle Ages, growing large and uniting with Lithuania to form the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, becoming the hegemon of Eastern Europe. But from here it all goes downhill. Competition against Sweden, the Ottomans, and Russia weakened them and made them lose land. Internal weakness and corruption then weakened them further, crippling them so hard that they essentially became a Russian puppet state. But if you thought this was the end of their troubles, then you'd be wrong. Following a series of partitions, all of Poland's territory got seized from them, wiping them off the map for the first time. But after a few years, Poland would get a short revival in the form of the Duchy of Warsaw, created by Napoleon. But following his loss at Leipzig and later Waterloo, Poland was entirely annexed by Russia. The following years would see Poland have some autonomy in Russia in the form of Congress Poland. But following the November uprising, Poland was integrated into the Russian Empire completely, with their autonomy being entirely stripped from them. This time under Russia would be remembered as a dark age in Polish history, with uprisings and anti-Russian demonstrations becoming common in the region. The Poles would dream of becoming free from their Russian, Prussian, and Austrian oppressors, and would look towards any opportunity to achieve their independence or autonomy. As the famous philosopher August Sitkowski said, Poland must rise, not just for itself, but for all of Europe, for Russia is the eternal threat to liberty. Poland's big opportunity would finally come in 1914, as Franz Ferdinand's assassination would lead to the First World War starting. The Poles would fight for both sides during the war, but most sided with the Central Powers against Russia, while Germany built a puppet state in Poland called the Kingdom of Poland, whose status was secure in 1917 following the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. German troops would stay in Poland and the Eastern Territories till the end of the war in 1918. Following that, the entire region would go ablaze, as everyone would fight each other. During this confusion, a rebellion in Poznan would put the region under Polish control, while they'd gain West Prussia and Danzig, following the Treaty of Versailles. After the collapse of Austria-Hungary and after defeating Ukrainian separatists in eastern Galicia, the entire region would be controlled by Poland. After some disputes with Lithuania, the Poles would take Vilnius, which Lithuania wanted to make its capital. This would sour relations between the two, but the real test for Poland would soon begin, as they would go to war with the Soviet Union in 1919. The war would start with Poland taking Minsk and reaching Kiev, but failing to properly set up a friendly government in Ukraine. After this, the Soviets would begin their counterattack, with them reaching the gates of Warsaw. But as all seemed lost, a miracle happened on the Vistula River. The Russians couldn't continue further, leading to the Poles striking back and taking as much territory as they could before signing a peace deal, securing Polish independence, with the First Polish Republic being born. Things would go great for Poland initially, but their previous actions left them isolated, with Romania becoming their only neighbor who was willing to ally with them. The rest of their neighbors would not like them, especially Germany and the Soviet Union. Their isolation would result in none of their neighbors coming to their aid after they got invaded. This invasion would result in horrible atrocities being committed against the Poles by the Nazis and to a lesser extent the Soviets, with millions or 18% of Poland's population dying due to the war. After the end of the war, they would have a communist government and would spend decades under the Soviet thumb, only becoming truly free in 1991. But what if things went differently? What if Poland wasn't alone and had allies? Today we will discuss that, but before starting the scenario, I would greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel, as only 13% of you are subscribed. Your support means the world to me and helps me make more content just like this. I would also like to announce that after this video, I will be going on a 1-month break to focus on my exams. Expect the new video to come on the 15th of June. But without any further ado, let's start the scenario. So, what changes do we need to make here? Well, the most obvious one would be that they'd need to be less aggressive in their expansion. First, Poland would fight Czechoslovakia over Zalosia. They wanted a region in our own timeline because a narrow majority of the population there spoke Polish. But here they would concede, with Czechoslovakia gaining the territory. This would improve relations between the two, which will become important later on. Moving a bit north, there is the matter of Vilnius. We would need Poland to make a decision here. Do they want to dominate their neighbors or do they want to work with them? Well, here Poland wouldn't fight with Lithuania over Vilnius, which would greatly improve relations between the two. Following this, Poland would gain the territory they got from Germany in our own timeline as part of Versailles. But here, Polish marshal, dictator, and war hero Pilsudski would make an appearance at Versailles to discuss the future of Eastern Europe with the Allies. By the end, all sides would agree that the victory of the Red Army over the Whites was inevitable, but the Allies and Poles would agree to a second plan to help Poland take as much land from the Soviets as possible and make independent states out of those lands, with the exact borders being discussed at another peace treaty elsewhere. Following this, the Polish-Soviet War would start. The war would go mostly the same, but we would have the Red Army struggle more in their civil war, leading to Poland reaching Kiev far earlier than they did in our own timeline. The rest of the year would be spent on creating an independent, but Polish-influenced, Ukraine and Belarus. Following this, the Poles would start a new offensive in the spring of 1920, which would be moderately successful, capturing Crimea and going into Russia proper. Following this, the Bolsheviks would sue for peace, with them begrudgingly accepting the loss of most of Eastern Europe. Following this, the Poles and the Allies would meet in the Italian town of Stresa to discuss the exact borders of the new states. Belarus would gain most of what they wanted, though Poland would gain some border regions, while the matter of Ukraine would be more tense. They would receive most of the remaining land, but the Ukrainians would demand Eastern Galicia from the Poles, which would make things difficult. But eventually, Poland would concede and grant Ukraine Eastern Galicia, though on the condition that Crimea becomes an independent state, though it would more or less be a Polish puppet. Ukraine would agree and peace would finally be secured in Eastern Europe. What now? Eastern Europe is finally independent, and Pilsudski can finally start working on his second plan, as the Soviets are busy trying to fix Russia. This plan would be known as the Intermarium project, an imagined economic and military alliance of Eastern European states against foreign aggression and imperialism. In our timeline, this was gonna be more or less Polish dominion over Eastern Europe, but that would never be sustainable, so it would become a more voluntary alliance. Initially, it would just be Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, and Crimea. But by mid-1921, they would be joined by Latvia and Lithuania, both of whom would seek protection and financial aid. This would strengthen the alliance as all their economies grow and they stand united against German and Russian aggression. Speaking of Russia, it's difficult to overstate how devastating these losses are for them. And though the Reds would win the Civil War, it doesn't really matter who takes over the Soviet Union. They would really struggle in this timeline. But I do think Stalin would still be the most likely candidate, but even his brutal methods wouldn't achieve the breakneck modernization we saw in our own timeline, as losing Ukraine alone has stripped 20% of our timeline's Soviet Union's population, which includes a lot of key agricultural and resource-rich regions. Combine that with the loss of Belarus and Crimea's Black Sea ports, and oh my, we would get a crippled Soviet Union. Though they would still have Baku and its oil fields, so their level of strength would be similar to the Intermarium. Now, as the years progress, the Intermarium would grow richer, with Poland heavily industrializing, mostly thanks to the territories they gained from Germany. This means that if things go well, industrial resources from Eastern Europe can help fuel Polish factories, while the Poles help set up factories in these regions. This would be a mutually beneficial alliance, improving all of their economies, as Eastern Europe finally starts living up to the potential that they've always had without German or Russian domination. Even better, after a few years, more nations would express interest in joining this alliance, with Estonia, Finland, Romania, and Czechoslovakia joining the alliance at the start of 1930 due to fears of Russian, Hungarian, and German remilitarization. This rise of Germany would be our final obstacle to tackle here. In 1933, the funny mustache man would come to power in Germany and immediately starts increasing the size of the armed forces. This would be a clear violation of the Treaty of Versailles, but the Allies would do nothing. Poland, on the other hand, would act. Even in our own timeline, Marshal Pilsudski suggested an invasion of Germany with France, but they declined. Here, Poland would invade, though France wouldn't join in. They'd make some gains, as at this point the Polish army was larger and better than the German one, but the Germans would eventually hold them off. Just then, Ukraine would ring the alarm bells as they would detect troop movement in Russia. So Poland and Germany would agree to sign a peace treaty mediated by the Allies. Poland would only annex some border regions and Danzig, but not much, as this wasn't some war of conquest, but a war to uphold Versailles. In exchange for accepting the treaty, some of the restrictions would be uplifted from Germany. This war would be a victory for Poland and an embarrassment for the ultranationalists. This would result in them not being able to remilitarize the Rhineland in 1936, but they still tried the Anschluss in 1937. France and Britain would agree to it, but Poland would demand parts of Silesia, which were rich in iron and coal, or else they'd declare war again. Germany would begrudgingly accept, as they would lose parts of Silesia, but would unite with Austria, so it wasn't a total loss. Following this, Germany wouldn't demand the Sudetenland, as Czechoslovakia was part of the Intermarium. Instead, they demand the return of northern Schleswig from Denmark, which they would accept, with them overrunning Denmark in a few days. After this, we would reach 1939, and by this time, Germany would be in somewhat of its shape to challenge the Intermarium. So, feeling overconfident, they demand the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia, which they refuse. Germany declares war on them, starting the Second World War. But this would be a huge mistake, as the Germans failed to make any gains in the Sudetenland due to the mountainous terrain and the famous Czechoslovak army. In Poland, though they would make some gains, but they would be stopped at Danzig and Poznan, with the rest of the Intermarium slowly mobilizing, much to Germany's dismay. The Allies here would do nothing and would slowly wait while building up their forces. As 1940 approaches, help would arrive for Germany as the Italians join in, but they failed to make any significant gains in France and by the end of the year lose their colonies. Germany would also see more help as they signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, forming an alliance with their arch-enemy, the Soviet Union. This would force the Intermarium to concentrate a large portion of their forces towards the east, leading to things getting better for Germany, with them finally taking Danzig. Feeling confident, the Germans would try to invade France through the Low Countries, but they would fail miserably as their army gets stuck in Belgium due to less preparation and numbers. This would soon lead to the Allies kicking Germany out of most of Belgium by the end of the year. As we approach 1941, the Soviets would make a breakthrough, reaching all the way to the Dnieper, threatening Kiev, while taking Minsk and all of Crimea. The Intermarium would manage to hold off the line here, as the brutal Battle of Kiev starts. Elsewhere, the British managed to take Sicily and Sardinia and land in Naples, forcing Italy to surrender, as Germany gets completely kicked out of the Low Countries, with the Allies advancing further into the German heartland as the year ends. As 1942 starts, the Allies would manage to take most of the Rhine, while the Poles and Czechoslovaks successfully kick out the Germans, starting a counteroffensive as the German war machine starts crumbling. While in the east, the Intermarium defeats the Soviets at the decisive Battle of Kiev, slowly pushing the Soviets out of their own territory. As 1943 approaches, the German lines start collapsing, with the Allies reaching Hamburg, while the Poles inch closer to Berlin. In the east, Minsk is liberated as the Soviets are kicked out of Belarus. Crimea is also liberated, with the Finns soon starting an offensive with the aim of taking Leningrad. In 1944, Berlin would finally fall, with the Germans capitulating. The funny mustache man kills himself in his bunker, while the Allies restore order in the country. Now, finally free, the Intermarium with Allied help pounce on the Soviets, slowly going deeper and deeper into Russia. Important cities like Leningrad and Smolensk would fall, with the Allies eventually reaching Moscow by the end of the year, as the Soviets surrender, finally ending the war. The peace treaty would be as follows. Italy would lose all their colonies, while losing Istria to Yugoslavia, a pretty mild result, with them once again becoming a constitutional monarchy after Mussolini gets overthrown. Moving on to Germany, There would be several proposals, but in the end, the Allies would decide to split the nation into three: a North German state centered around Berlin and a South German state centered around Vienna. The Rhineland becomes a French puppet, while Poland annexes Silesia, parts of Pomerania, and East Prussia. And finally, the Soviets would see huge losses. Finland would take Karelia and the regions above it. Estonia, Latvia, and Belarus would receive large border regions, while Ukraine and Crimea take most of Russia's remaining Black Sea coast. Azerbaijan, Armenia, and the Central Asian states received their independence, with the first three immediately joining the Intermarium. The communists would also be removed from power in Russia. After the end of the war, the Intermarium would be joined by Albania, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, and Greece, becoming even stronger. Here, America would remain isolationist due to them not getting involved in the war. This would mean no Cold War happens, but decolonization would still slowly happen. In the 1950s and 60s, after several talks, France would join the Intermarium as it becomes a pan-European defense alliance to safeguard the continent. This would be followed by Italy and South Germany. By the 70s, the Intermarium would become a true beast, a web of nationalities all united with one clear goal in mind: they will never, ever again be subjugated or oppressed by another power, and would work towards securing peace, equality, and freedom in Europe and around the world. As Mustafa Kemal once said, "Peace at home, peace in the world." But this is where I'll end the scenario. If you liked it, please consider subscribing and liking, and leave your thoughts in the comments down below. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.